hột gà nướng, hột vịt lộn, hột vịt sữa, trứng cút lộn, mắm xào đen.
Whether you're an expat here in Vietnam or you're living in your home country, you're probably always thinking about the future. And when it comes to long-term savings, where do you even begin? So that's where our partner Tenzing Pacific can really help you. One of the benefits of living in Vietnam is the cost of living is more affordable, so it often means that you have an increased amount of disposable income. And if you've got disposable income, how do you make the most of that extra cash to help you build a solid financial future? With Tenzing Pacific, you can start investing for as little as $250 a month. And they work with international providers, giving you access to world-class investment managers and global brands that you know. And one of the best things about investing is it's all about getting rich in the future. And by investing just $500 a month for 5 years, with a standard 8% annual return, you could end up with over $250,000 after 30 years, which is not bad for actually only investing $30,000. Now, I know 30 years sounds like a long time, but I've been in Vietnam for 8 and I feel like I got here yesterday. It's not that long. And that is the power of consistent investing. So are you ready to secure your future with the world's leading investment opportunities? Then talk to a Tenzing advisor today and find out how easy it is to start saving. Click the link in the description to get started and access special offers for a Vietnam podcast. And our partner, Seven Bridges Brewing Company, has just been crowned Champion Brewery of Vietnam at the 2024 Asia Beer Championship. And not only that, 4 of their beers have won 2 gold medals at international competitions. Well done to all those guys and their team. That is absolutely incredible. But as you may know about Seven Bridges, it's not just about the beer. They are committed to sustainability, which I absolutely love. And their brewing is with a focus on making a positive impact. So they reuse a lot of their ingredients in things like their pizza dough and their amazing spicy dragon sauce. So it means that you can enjoy a great beer and support a company that cares about the environment. So if you're hungry and you're a little bit thirsty, then they've got you covered with some of the best pizza that goes with their spicy dragon sauce and my favorite drink, the Hai Van Haze. So cheers to good beer, good food, and doing good. Get yourself down to Seven Bridges Brewing Company, wherever you can find them in Vietnam. And most importantly, when you do go, make sure you invite me if you're in Saigon, and I'll see you there for a beer.
I remember being a little bit afraid and asking my sister, what do people say when you tell them you're American? They must be so appalled, they must mistreat you. We did horrible things to them.
Hey, it's Neil here from a Vietnam podcast, and thanks for tuning in to the first ever episode of the Saigon Sunday Sessions. After season 10, I started to do more and more episodes about myself and life in Saigon and in Vietnam. So we shared things like your top 10 happy hours and where to go for craft beer. We did a pub crawl, and I really enjoyed those more casual episodes, but they didn't really fit into, I guess, what a Vietnam podcast does, which is one-on-one interviews and sharing stories of people connected to Vietnam. So what I've decided to do, I'm going to bring you an extra episode every week called the Saigon Sunday Sessions, and just bring you more of a casual conversation around a certain topic. And so I recorded an episode with Adrie Lopez Mackay, as you might know by now, who's my amazing wife. And I wanted to know something a bit about what it was like to be an American living in Vietnam, which he's obviously an American and lives in Vietnam. And because through a Vietnam podcast and doing interviews and talking to people, I realized that not just Americans, but because of obviously the war, Americans have certain preconceived ideas about what it's like to live in Vietnam, come to Vietnam as a holiday, or they may have preconceived ideas, I'm not sure. And also, as Adrie's been here for obviously the same amount of time as me, 8 years, what it is like to live in Vietnam, in Saigon, as an American. So we went out for brunch to the Mekong Merchant, no affiliation, no sponsorship at all. And we just talked about what it was like for her to be an American living in Vietnam, basically. So I hope you enjoy this chat. It's a bit casual. It's not the same as a normal Vietnam podcast, but we're going to be bringing more of these to you in the future. So let me know what you think of this episode. And remember, if you do like it, please subscribe, follow, turn on the notifications if you haven't already. If you want to join the community on Patreon, go to patreon.com/a Vietnam podcast, and you can become a Bop Sao Dare, which means you'll be watching videos like this way before anyone else gets to see them. You get invited to special events, and you'll basically be a really cool person. So join on patreon.com, a Vietnam podcast, and enjoy the first ever episode of the Saigon Sunday Sessions with Adrie Lopez Mackay sharing about what it's like living in Vietnam as an American. Enjoy.
Hột gà nướng, hột vịt lộn, hột vịt sữa, trứng cút lộn, bắp xào đây.
Today we want to talk to Adrie about what life is like in Vietnam for an American. But what were your perceptions of Vietnam before you ever came here, before you even thought about coming here as an American?
I think, like most Americans, you only associate Vietnam or know much about Vietnam because of the war, obviously. And beyond that, I mean, I probably hadn't really thought of much about Vietnam until my sister applied for a job here, decided to relocate in Vietnam.
Well, so growing up, what did you get taught in school about the Vietnam War?
I honestly don't remember I don't remember learning about the Vietnam War. It might have just been like a blip in, history. Obviously you learn more about like the how the war affected like policies and stuff at that time, and like who the presidents were and what they were doing and all that. I think you learn more about the American side of it, and Vietnam is just this distant place where the war took place. You obviously hear about the protests and resistance to the war domestically, but I think a lot of people as well, when they think of Southeast Asia, and I'm sure this is changing. I mean, keep in mind, I've lived abroad overseas for more than 10 years. So when people thought of Southeast Asia, it's Thailand. Everyone thinks of Thailand. And I think Vietnam's more on the map now, but I didn't really know much about Vietnam at all.
When you're coming from overseas, right, you hear Vietnam, you think the Vietnam War, there's been so many movies about it, I guess, especially from our age group, right? We know you know all the movies growing up, you know there was like large protests in America, you know it was a controversial war, but you don't really know much else about it, right?
That's true. I mean, the movie Good Morning Vietnam.
Like Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, I'd never seen that until I was an adult.
But then, so did you have any perceptions? We first came here in 2015 on a vacation.
Yeah.
And I think we've learned over the years that, lots of Americans have perceptions and hesitations about coming to Vietnam. Did you have any of those feelings?
It's funny because I remember when she moved to Australia and we thought it was going to be, just another Western place. And I remember having like a video call with her and like when she first moved to Australia, and she's like, what have I done? And it was just like this crazy experience for her. Whereas when she moved to Vietnam, it was like, I think relatively easy. And the mystique was taken down, but I was still a bit kind of like, when we first came to visit, I was like, what do I pack? What are we doing? What's it like there? And I'd been to Southeast Asia before, so it wasn't like a totally new like vibe or anything. But when we came to visit, obviously we were coming as tourists and had no idea what the future would hold, that we would eventually become residents of the country. I knew it was hot.
Well, so we got to Vietnam as a holiday, and then I think the biggest thing was going to the War Remnants Museum. And what did that make you feel as an American, going to the War Remnants Museum and finding out it's not actually called the Vietnam War?
Well, yeah, I think that's what I was going to say in terms of like when it kind of all clicked and changed. For me, like, you have one perspective of history, you're taught what your country wants you to know, and obviously from an American perspective, it's a very dominant USA perspective. And I don't even know if I knew growing up that we had lost the Vietnam War, because it's not really even like taught like that. It's just kind of like, oh, there was this war in Vietnam, a lot of people were against it, and then it ended. Like,
you love a fish called Wanda as well, right? One of my favorite scenes is near the end when Kevin Kline, I think he has John Cleese in a barrel of concrete, and he's basically John Cleese is English, and he's making fun of Kevin Kline that they lost the war, and he's like, we didn't lose the war. And then eventually he's like, okay, it was a tie. Like, that's as far as he would admit. I think he won't admit that they lost it.
You English, you think you're so superior, don't you? Well, you're the filth of the planet. A bunch of pompous, badly dressed, poverty-stricken, sexually repressed football hooligans. Goodbye, Archie.
Well, at least we're not irretrievably vulgar.
You know your problem? You don't like winners.
Winners?
Yeah. Winners.
Winners like North Vietnam?
Shut up! We did not lose Vietnam. It was a tie.
I'm telling you, baby, they kicked a little ass there. Boy, they whooped your hide real good.
No, they didn't.
Oh, yes, they did.
Oh, no, they didn't.
Oh, yes, they did.
Oh, no, they didn't. Shut up!
Here it was called the War of American Atrocities because it was so exactly that, atrocious, and how devastating it was to the country, the population, everyone that lived here, and how it had lasting repercussions for decades afterwards. It's just absolutely appalling. And I remember, I think we went there on our first or second, maybe our second day in the city, in the country, and that totally painted my perspective for the next 2.5 weeks when we traveled the country. And I remember being like a little bit afraid and asking my sister, like, what do people say when you tell them you're American? Like, they must be so appalled, they must mistreat you, like we did horrible things to them. And she was like, no, people love Americans here. And I remember being really surprised about that. Like, wait, what? Why do they love Americans? We've like absolutely like ruined their, like a long part of their history. And she was right. I mean, we traveled up and down the country, and nowhere did we meet anyone. And still to this day, I don't know that I've ever met anyone that was like, oh, you're American, like you're a bad person. It's more like, America, they're good, which is refreshing and surprising. But you learn the longer that you're here. The Vietnamese population is very young. And so, I mean, we weren't alive during the war, and we're in our 40s. So anyone that's younger than us and, you know, slightly older than us as well, they don't really think about the war. It doesn't color their memory and their past. And what I have heard from younger Vietnamese people is that their parents and their grandparents don't really want to talk about it. They all have this shared trauma of this massive historical, you know, situation. But yeah, I think that's quite similar to, I guess, Western experiences when, like, a lot of, you know, our grandparents were in World War II, and, you know, you have to get them in the right frame of mind or the right place or the right time to kind of talk about those topics. A lot of them don't want to willingly share that information because it's traumatic. And you find that here as well.
Why do you think that Vietnamese people are so forgiving or accepting? Because I think it's a valid perception to have that you've come to this country that was destroyed in a lot of ways by American policy. You would think that they're not going to be accepting of Americans. And I think that played out in that terrible movie, The Five Bloods, and there's a scene where...
No, I said...
You haven't even seen any of it? I thought we watched it.
Said,
don't watch it. Yeah, don't watch it.
Paints Vietnam in such a ignorant...
Yeah, because apparently Spike was obviously an amazing director, but he hadn't come here, he hadn't really done any research, he'd just written the story. And so the story is there's 5 African-American ex-soldiers come back to find their hidden treasure, which is a ridiculous story in itself.
Yeah, and the perspective is like frozen in time, which a lot of people think. But until you come here in modern day Vietnam, you recognize that, like, that perspective, maybe it held true 30 or 40 years ago, but it doesn't anymore. Like, there aren't kids in the street looking at a foreigner running up to them and saying, GI, GI.
Well, no, so that's what I was going to say. That's the worst scene in the movie is the 5 guys are at a, like, nightclub or bar or something like that in downtown Saigon, and then this little kid with, like, one leg missing on crutches runs up and starts going, UGI, and it's just like, there are some crippled children maybe in the city begging for money, but really not that common at all. And obviously they were trying to give the perception that this kid was maybe maimed by the war or something like that. I don't know what perception they were trying to give, but there's no young children running up to Americans in Saigon going UGI, like, it just doesn't happen at all. So we're at Mekong Merchant, so we're going to stop right now while we park and get set up. So these are brand new episodes we're doing, Sunday session episodes. You're the first guest. I'm interested in like what it's like as an American in Vietnam. So we were just saying how it's the perception that people think you're going to come here as an American and someone's going to hassle you on the street, which is what is showed in the movie.
Well, it depends on what you mean by hassle. But yeah, you might get hassled by vendors.
But not because you're American, they were going to do that because you're just a tourist. Yeah.
Well, you asked on the bike, though, why do you think, or why do I think that young Vietnamese or Vietnamese in general are so forgiving? I think in general, one of the reasons I like being in Vietnam is because people are so friendly. People are so welcoming here, even if they don't speak your language. I mean, a lot of them do now, especially in the time that we lived here. The English levels have just gone up and up and up, and the proficiency increased so much. But even without that, when we first arrived in 2015, 2016, and even when my sister was here in that's just one of the reasons that people love it here, is that, yeah, there are the occasional scams, but like any tourist place, right? But on the whole, people here are just very warm, very welcoming, very friendly, and I think that probably has something to do with it. Like the culture as a whole is just a really, really... I know we often say that like a lot of the reason why a lot of things are done the way they are done here is in part because of the Buddhist ties, right? For example, not shouting at people and
the lack of road rage.
Face and all of those kinds of things. I don't know why they're forgiving. I don't know if that answers that question.
No, but I think you made a good point, right? So the war finished in 75. So it's 2024 now. It's 50 years ago.
50 years.
So if you're younger than 50, you weren't even alive when the war was on.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then if you're 60, you're 10 years old. So only people who fought in the war really would have been people 65 means you would be 15, so 66, 67 and older, and then they don't want to talk about it as well. And yeah, I mean, so it's quite weird, right? Because I'm 42, you're about the same, whether you want to deny it or not. And when we were growing up, the difference between the end of the Second World War and when we were growing up is about the same as the end of the war and young people, the Vietnam War, and young people growing up now.
Yeah.
And we knew about it. I don't really remember. Like you said,
It
you don't
felt
remember.
just like such, I mean, it was not that it was a memory we had, but like a distant past, a distant memory.
It was only
right?
20, and that finished, 1945?
Yeah, when we watch like historical documentaries or accounts about it now, I'm just like completely flabbergasted that even happened. Like it was like the deadliest conflict in human history.
And it was only like 40 years before
Yeah.
we were in primary school or high school. So same now, if you're a Vietnamese student, the American War is only 40 years ago.
But also, I mean, I guess we have to think about how you're obviously taught like your country's perspective, and what we do know about the Vietnamese perspective on their history and what students do learn is that they have a very successful conflict record, I suppose.
Well, I was going to go back to the War Remnants Museum, which is like a must for every tourist that comes to Saigon. And one of the funniest things, I love it. You know, I can't remember years ago. So if you go to the War Remnants Museum, you get a sticker to say you've entered. And some people forget to take them off, and you walk around the city and you can just see people. And I remember,
You always know these tourists.
I said to somebody one time, maybe I'd had a few drinks, I was like feeling funny. I remember someone maybe was in a bar or somewhere, because I wouldn't have just said it to them in the street, but I was like, oh,
Layla? I feel like it was in Layla.
yeah, may have been, yeah. And I was like, oh, how is the War Remnants Museum? And they were like, how did you know I went to the War Remnants Museum? And I was like, you still got the sticker on, because everyone leaves the sticker on. But it is, and it's everybody has the same opinions of it, and if you read reviews of it, it's the same. And so, for anyone who doesn't know, the War Remnants Museum is a historical museum, but it's from Vietnam's perspective. And when you go there as a Westerner, as a foreigner, it's massively eye-opening, right?
It's a really, really trying experience. I would say when you're going to go, I mean, it's a solemn experience. Very sad. I think most people don't even care about the fact that the museum is not very good. Like, it's not a good museum, like, in terms of the exhibits and stuff, but the things that you see and the things that you read and the things that you learn are just awful.
Which are?
And it,
We haven't even said what is in the museum. Like, what is it that's like
I mean,
so different and so shocking and so solemn?
God,
so-
it's been years since we went, so I don't really want to speak. But I mean, you see photos of the things that were done. You hear about I don't really want to like think deep into that part of my brain. It's so like awful.
Which the things I remember the most was there was a graph of how much America had actually like funded the French war or like the French resistance or not resist. I don't know again what you call it exactly, but so it was interesting. So even though America wasn't directly involved in the war, they were massively funding like the French operation for years, and it showed you this graph of how much America was putting in, and it was increasing each year before they even got officially involved.
Yeah.
What the big one I took away from it was, do you remember there was this stuff about the My Lai?
Yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking of when I said I don't really want to think about it over our lovely weekend brunch.
Yeah. But if you don't know what it is, look it up. It's a real thing that happened that I don't think was really reported in America much at all. Definitely not in the American like history.
No, I mean, it definitely completely like 180 my perspective on what I didn't know. I obviously learned a lot, changed my perspective entirely as an American on the war and the history of the war, and it made me just want to learn more from different perspectives as opposed to the one short one that we're taught.
Well, I remember hearing that phrase growing up, or maybe not growing up, but as a young adolescent or whatever, like history's always written by the victors, right? And this was the first time that I experienced that in real life, and I was like, oh, like now I know what this means, because I'd only ever learned like Western perspectives, mostly from like we say movies, culture, like a ton of Hollywood, and I don't remember getting it specifically taught in school either. But you don't remember most of the things you got taught in school though, right? But that was the first time I was like, oh, so we've learned it from like the Western perspective, and now this is
the penny drops that there's like another side to every situation.
And you're like, and then you learn about the My Lai massacre, which was just horrible. You learn a lot of the terrible things.
And you do see a lot of people. They usually have people there that have been affected by Agent Orange, so they might be like have some sort of disability. I think there's part of the museum where they can sell the things that they make, and that's really awful to see as well. Like you realize that the bombs that were dropped and the nerve agents that were used decades and decades and decades ago have had such a lasting effect on people's lives even still today. Like people are still being born with disabilities or deformities.
But what it showed in the museum was even in America, people are still being born, so children of American soldiers, because it wasn't just the Vietnamese who were exposed to it. That was like, oh my God. So how did that make you feel as an American then when we went there? Can you remember? Like,
I remember being, I mean, I definitely cried.
Yeah.
It was such a sobering, really, really sad experience. I felt awful. I mean, I don't really know how else. I just remember feeling really awful. And then, like I said, I know we've been there twice. We went there first as tourists, and then we went there again when your parents came.
Yeah. And we were more of a guide than
which was only a year, maybe like 2 years later. And we haven't actually been back since. We should go back just to refresh our memories. I remember, like I said, it painted my whole perception in that first 3.5 weeks traveling Vietnam. And, everywhere I went, I was kind of like looking for, not like signs of the war, but the lack of signs of the war, I guess. And there's a massive difference as well. The museum is in southern Vietnam, which was on the side of the Americans. Hanoi is quite different in the north because they were the winning side on the side of the communists. So there is a bit of a north-south divide that you do feel when you get to northern Vietnam a little bit. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Steve Ahern, one of the judges of the Asia Podcast Awards. I'm interrupting this episode to let you know that you're listening to an award-winning podcast. This podcast won its category in the 2024 Podcast Awards, so you know you're listening to quality. Enjoy your listening experience, and congratulations to the team who created this award-winning podcast for you.
So we just had our food. That was amazing. I had the barbecue pulled pork, eggs Benedict, which was amazing. Then what was yours?
Chickpea waffle with halloumi.
My Bloody Mary's going down nicely. So we were talking about War Remnants Museum, but we don't want to talk too much about that. But if you're coming to Vietnam, go check it out. Be prepared, it is harrowing.
And they close for lunch, so check the hours. So don't go at like 12 o'clock because you're going to have to wait 2 hours.
So we already covered being an American is actually fine in Vietnam. You don't get discriminated against, which is weird that they love them. But I think because I don't know, because most people around the world hate Americans nowadays.
Yeah, people hate Americans because they're loud. Have you ever heard the level of volume that
Well,
these people
that is
speak
true.
at?
No, but I think most people dislike Americans around the world because of American foreign policy over the last 20 years, dragging us into wars and
Maybe.
causing just general chaos across the world.
I mean, I don't generally ask people, why do you hate me?
Yeah, but you know they do.
No, I don't think most Americans do realize that.
I don't think they are hated, but America, the country, is quite generally disliked, and I think it is mostly because of the foreign policy.
But again, I don't think a lot of Americans do realize that. We're not taught that. We're taught that America's the greatest country in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say I don't agree with that.
But so
that's just like pride, right? Like, I don't say nationalism. That's not the word I'm looking for.
Americans are filled with propaganda and nationalism every day. Pledge of Allegiance, you sing the national anthem before sports.
I'm well aware of that. But it's not like other countries don't have their versions of those things also.
I don't know, do other countries, do they sing the national anthem before a sporting event? I think that's so weird.
I have no idea because I didn't really go to that many sporting events elsewhere, but...
I mean, we do it before a game when the national team plays. So if Scotland plays or England or France, the team sings the national anthem. But if I went to a Rangers game, we don't sing the national anthem before the game and they're like, yeah, we fucking love Scotland. It's just I think Americans...
What's wrong with pledging your allegiance to the flag?
Pledging your allegiance to anything is pretty bad, in my opinion.
Everyone is a citizen of their country. You have to have a certain level of pride in that. Otherwise...
I don't think you do, though.
But you don't have to.
Yeah. I mean, more like, what's it, John Lennon? Imagine there's no countries, imagine there's no borders. It's just a man-made construct that there's a line somewhere.
Literally everything in life is a man-made construct. We are men, humankind.
Yeah, but there are things that are natural.
Yeah, but we create these things for a reason. I know there's a massive history behind why we probably pledge allegiance to them. Thank you.
We couldn't resist dessert. We got sticky toffee pudding, so excuse us while we eat. This looks amazing with popcorn and vanilla ice cream. Moving away from Americans, how they're treated here and whatnot.
They love our accent.
They do. I love an
English
American.
is the easiest to understand.
I do love an American accent.
I love hearing a Vietnamese person with Scottish or a Australian or just another accent though. I had a student once that he clearly had learned French first.
Yeah.
I know we're getting off topic, and here, Aperol Spritz. Gosh, we're just going to be here all day for every meal. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Right, little side story. Fond memory of the student I had years and years ago. He clearly had learned French before, so he would pronounce his English R's like a French person. He was Vietnamese, but had a French accent when he was learning and speaking English. Yeah, it was really, really cute. I say cute, he was a teenager. That small, but it was still very...
Like a 5-year-old?
No, he was probably 14 or something.
Well, my favorite one was a few years ago. When we first got here, remember I taught that one class for a year and a half at Centre 3?
Yeah.
And we went back home. I think it was the first time we'd gone away for an extended time, and so a teacher covered my classes.
Yeah.
And when I came back, she's like, they sound so Scottish. They sound just like you. And I was like, what? No, they don't. She's like, no, they do. And then I went into the classroom, and I'd never noticed it before. And the first thing I heard was this kid, Harry, going, what are you doing? To another kid. And I was like, oh my goodness, they do sound Scottish.
And they've picked up your phrase, what are you doing?
Yeah, because I'd normally walk in and they'd be messing about. And I'd be like, what are you doing? Sit down. And you said you could always hear me being really Scottish.
No, I remember the first time we were walking to class together and you went into your classroom and right as the door was shutting, I heard, sit down.
Yeah. These kids, they get a mixed bag of accents, because there's teachers from all over the world.
I say, I always kind of feel bad for the little kids that get an Irish teacher and they have to learn 3 and tree, which for an Irish person literally is the same word. trees.
Yeah, I know. And then you got obviously South African and Russian teachers, Filipino teachers. You know, it's cool when the kids have like different accents,
Yeah.
but they all want American accents.
Not all, but a lot do.
Yeah. You do have such a neutral accent.
I think also because, like, I mean, so much of like, Hollywood and like, like a lot of famous young YouTubers and stuff are American.
Yeah.
I think that's what they're influenced
I mean,
by now, less than Hollywood movies. Probably.
There's obviously it's when you know the difference, you can tell the difference between like a LA accent or Californian and like a Boston. And, yeah, I don't even know what a Florida accent sounds like, but you can tell. But to most untrained ears, American accents just all sound the same.
Yes, and most people, a lot of people in cities have like neutral accents. Like I have a pretty neutral accent.
Yeah, I'm still disappointed at that.
Despite being from Texas.
Yeah.
Howdy, y'all.
So my last questions are about the practical, boring stuff about being an American living overseas.
Okay.
So what is it like?
Health insurance?
Yeah, things like that, health insurance.
Well, I know that health insurance here is a lot better than in the US.
But what are some of the practical things? What more I was thinking along the lines of as well is obviously there's a big election coming up and I just get pounded with YouTube ads about how to vote as an American overseas, and Trump's obviously been doing some lying as always lately about overseas Americans voting, something to do with that. He's probably going to claim that there's 10 million. I read about it, there's only 3 million Americans overseas. Yeah, which is like 1% of the population about. I don't know if that
3
includes the
million does
military.
sound like a lot. Probably not, because I don't think those.
Yeah, they're probably not.
I don't think like military bases and stuff count as.
Yeah,
They are like
overseas.
overseas, but like
Yeah.
American bases.
But anyway, in terms of voting and things like
I
that.
thought you were gonna ask logistically or practically, like how do you watch American football and things
Well,
like
even
that.
things like
I
that.
mean,
Yeah. So go on, even things like that. So if you're an American living overseas, living in Vietnam, how do you access some things that from back home to try and create a sense
well,
of homeliness?
I should say two things. Obviously, we've lived overseas for quite some time, more than a decade, and here for 8 years. Some people are probably more diehard than others. Like, for example, we used to watch American football quite a lot. I don't really watch it as much or follow it as much. Like, our first year here, we managed to find a sports bar that was willing to, rest in peace, Game On, that was willing to show American football on a Monday night, because it was quite a dead night for them anyway. So we would not try to stay off social media on Mondays so you wouldn't get any of the updates or scores or anything like that. And then we'd go watch our games on a Monday night, which was really fun. Had a couple other Americans join us. I don't know if bars
And
would do that.
non-Americans.
Yeah, and non-Americans. I don't know if bars would do that now, probably. But like, for example, most of the games are in the middle of the night on a Sunday night or an early Monday morning, and I work Monday morning, so I don't really watch football like I used to, which is sad.
But you can't, I mean, we would use a VPN or
Yeah.
just a dodgy website, basically. Shh, don't tell anyone. And stream the games. We had the NFL game.
I was going to say there was 1 or 2 years where we actually got Game Pass, because we were watching a lot of the games.
Yeah.
But that was because we had a different working schedule.
Yeah,
You
that's
could
right.
still watch some of the games because you work from home.
Normally
But again, a
listening
lot
to
of
something
them are in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Really early.
But you can get NFL Game Pass if you're a massive fan, and it does work over here. It's like an overseas
You can get a
package.
VPN and then get.
But I think you could use it without a VPN, and it was cheaper if I remember, because
If you're overseas.
it was like the overseas NFL package. Whereas if you put a VPN in America, you got charged more, something like that. Anyway, so you get your NFL fix.
But like, unfortunately, there's a lot of sports I used to follow and watch in the U.S. that I just don't anymore. Like, I was talking to one of my American colleagues, and he was like, "Oh, do you follow hockey? Do you follow baseball?" And I was like, "I used to follow a little bit of baseball, and I'm never a huge hockey fan, but basketball when I was in the U.S. and like." Because of the time differences, I only have like bandwidth enough to follow like one major sport. So it's American football, and most of the other ones have kind of fallen by the wayside. I think many Americans vote overseas. Like there's overseas or abroad organizations like Democrats Abroad. I'm sure there's a Republican equivalent that will organize.
No, Republicans don't travel. They generally don't leave their home.
That's true.
state.
Speaking of like nationalistic pride.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, though. We've noticed as we've traveled that most people you meet are left-leaning and liberal. And I think,
conspiracy theorists.
or conspiracy, which is still left-leaning, I guess. kind of depends. Well, it depends, doesn't it? But anyway, you don't meet many. I can't remember in all my time ever meeting even like a right-wing conservative British person or a right-wing Republican. And I think either they hide it, which they probably should, or they just don't travel much because they're so nationalistic and my country's the best, so I'm never leaving.
Or they travel, don't like a place and go home.
Yeah, they're those people that like go and, go to like a beautiful French restaurant in Vietnam and drink Aperol Spritzes, those kind of people. If you want to dive deeper into our community of passionate listeners, then we have restarted our Patreon so that we can build a community of people, and we're calling that community the Bop Sao Dares. You can choose a level that suits you. You can become a Cafe Suada, a Banh Mi, a Com Tam, a Bun Tet Nung, or the ultimate level, you can become a Bop Sao Day. Join the fun with me and let's explore Vietnam together like never before. So hit that link in the show notes and join my podcasting adventure of a Vietnam podcast today. Cheers!
You can vote from abroad. You can register to vote from abroad. Not a problem. Well, years ago, again, we watched this was in 2016, we watched presidential debate on a Monday morning,
bar,
I think.
yeah.
No, we watched it from our apartment.
What second came on as well?
No.
I remember we went to a bar to watch one of the presidential
That wasn't my
debates.
point. My point
Anyway.
was that you can watch those things. But like, for example, the vice presidential debate, didn't watch that the other day because it was,
Nobody watched that.
well, that. And it was at like a really awkward time during the work week.
Yeah.
And, I think other Americans are probably more adept and used to like shopping online and getting deliveries and stuff. But here, you have to be wary of import tax, and they can kind of slap whatever they want to on your package coming into the country.
We've never really had that. We've not really ordered much, but I saw somebody post last week that like my stuff is stuck in customs and they want like a random amount of money.
Yeah, so some people get lucky and order from websites overseas and get the delivery and they have to pay a little bit of money. But like some people get really unlucky and have to pay a lot of money. So my strategy has been just don't order from overseas. So yeah, I mean, like in terms of if you miss stuff, like I know when I go home or if we go to Australia or another Western country or the UK, whatever, I usually try to buy things that might be more expensive here or hard to get here. But again, having lived in many different places and been overseas for so many years, there's a lot of products that I've just kind of like said good riddance to, and I don't.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, right? So we went back last January, and what things do you miss that you'd forgotten about, and then we went back home and you're like, oh yeah, like this, like what can you just not get here? What can you get here but it's more expensive? And what brands and chains do you miss
I mean, I guess I'm mostly thinking of food.
Well, yeah,
that's just me, but so there are Western grocery stores here that are a lot more common now than they used to be. So NM is a chain where you can get a lot of American stuff and other Western things. And then there's the two shops on Hemney, which you can also get a lot of American import products, like some toiletries, but food. So as a goldfish fanatic for my entire life, you can get regular plain and cheddar goldfish here, but you cannot get flavored blasted. So I got those when I was back in the US. Yeah, love cheddar blasted goldfish. You can get like all sorts of snacks and things now. You can get the American candy and stuff.
Well, you have to go to specialized shops.
But it's so weird when we went back to the US a year and a half ago, or almost 2 years ago now. I was just struck by the variety of things. Like you go into a shop and you're like, oh, I just want to get some sweet tarts. And it's like, now you can get hard sweet tarts, chewy sweet tarts, giant sweet tarts, like sweet tart, little balls. Like there's just, and then Oreos, there's like 50 different kinds of Oreos. Yeah. And I'm like, we were like aliens going into the first convenience store. Like they probably thought we were like, had been trapped underground for 10 years or something. We were like, how do you use this cashless machine? Like, oh my God, look, have you seen all the flavors of Cheetos? Like, I think that's the biggest crazy thing for me. Like makeup and beauty products and stuff, they've changed so much in the decade that I've been away, or more than 10 years that I've been away. I don't even know what's cool and popular anymore, but you can get a lot of that stuff here. Like, we have now shops that will import Western, like toiletry and makeup brands and stuff like that. So it's not as hard to get, but if you have something that you love, it's always a good idea to stock up when you're overseas. Or if you're like me, I'm tan and everyone here wants to be white. So it's really hard for me to like, I've never really even tried to get like powder or foundation here or concealer. Well, I have tried and they don't make it in my color. So if you have darker skin, definitely get that when you're home or in the States or get it shipped. And then if you're bustier, like myself as well, to all you listeners who can't see the video, get bras, underwear, that kind of thing. Because, yeah, I mean, Westerners were just generally bigger than the standard Vietnamese woman. So, and then shoes as well. I'm like just at the cusp of like the biggest size shoe that they make. So they make up to 39, but a Vietnamese 39 is not really the same as a European 39 or like another European 39, which is for people that don't know what that means, like about an 8 US. And sometimes I can find, which is a 6 UK. I can find shoes that I could just barely kind of fit into, but on the whole, like not usually. So I have to go to special stores to like find shoes that fit.
Well, clothes have gotten way better, obviously, than when we first came here. There was barely an H&M. Now there's like H&M, Zara, Old Navy.
Better, it's still like fast fashion.
No, but I mean like the options. But the funny thing I wanted to mention is though, that people need to watch out for when they come here. They have something really strange, that they have specific petite sizes in Old Navy. Like you're saying about the size of people are different. So you go to Old Navy and you're like, oh, that's nice. Oh, it's my size, but it's the petite version.
Yeah, or like some stores, I think I'm thinking of like the sports stores like Adidas and Nike and stuff. They'll have like Asian fit, which I didn't even know was a thing. But you'll go and you'll like see the tag and it's like specifically designed for Asian fit, which generally means smaller. So
it worked out good for me because when I go shopping, I'm like a large and an extra large now, triple XL sometimes. I'm like, man, I'm so big now here, which I am bigger than a lot of people here.
But if I'm at a height where I can kind of fit into petite sizes. I'm like almost 5'5". But if you're like any taller than that, like petite sizes are going to fit you slightly differently. And Asian fit's not going to fit a tall person. So yeah, I think
I find out with
shopping definitely when I'm back home is, I hate shopping. I hate shopping under pressure. And that's what you have to do when you're home. But
yeah, because it's like, we've got to get this done. We have 2 times we're going to go to the mall.
Yeah, go buy some shoes, go buy some sports bras, whatever.
T-shirts are the same for me, right? Like when I buy T-shirts here, they're normally never long enough because I'm so tall and skinny. And then, when I go back, I'm like, I want to get T-shirts. But so the one thing I wanted to add that I miss from America, which I thought you were going to bring up, Dunkin' Donuts, Krispy Kreme,
That's what you've been waiting for.
Taco Bell.
Well, I was going to say Chipotle. We got distracted by... I was thinking of like restaurants and stuff. And my colleague literally 2 days ago, he was like, God, I just really want Chipotle. Like, you just can't get that here. You can get similar flavors, but like not...
They just haven't taken off here. Like Dunkin' Donuts was here, and now it's just disappeared.
Same with Subway.
Subway, I mean, that makes sense because Subway's garbage and banh mi's are 10 times better. But
if you want a Subway, you just want a Subway.
You want to eat fresh.
$5 footlong.
Yeah, $5 footlong, right? Is that inflation now? Is that not a $10 footlong? I don't know. Has it changed?
I remember when we were in the UK, we were surprised that they were still pretty cheap.
Yeah. But yeah, you do things like that don't exist here, right? And you do. I miss Dunkin' Donuts. I'd like just a Dunkin' Donuts, iced coffee and a donut. I don't know why. Like, yeah, Starbucks is doing okay. McDonald's is not really taking off. There's a couple,
They
but
just
not.
closed it.
Yeah, the big ones. They're just not taking off, right? Like they're around, but when we went back, there's like a McDonald's everywhere. Here, they're like just.
That's also because so many other like Asian chains are here as well, and you have such a mixed expat population. So you'll have like Korean chains or like Jollibee, which I think is a Filipino fast food chain. You get KFC all over Asia. We've never eaten that. Texas chicken, which is the same as, oh God, what's it called in the US? I just totally forgotten. Church's chicken. The same as Church's chicken.
What's the other one? Popeye's chicken. Popeye's chicken's good. So it does have like some of these chains. So it's weird that like Dunkin' Donuts hasn't really taken over a donut shop.
It did, and then it closed.
But it didn't take off. But overall, what is it like as an American living overseas? You lived overseas. You lived in Australia, New Zealand, now Vietnam.
I mean, it's always around this time of the, political timeline where it's kind of like, thank God I live overseas. Like I just remember in 2016 when Trump was elected, and it was just, I had friends messaging me being like, how do I move overseas? I'm scared for my children because like they were, dark skin, whatever. Like, you know, I think it gets really, seeing just some of the like rhetoric and hate on Facebook and posts and things, even from like friends and family, where I'm like, I really just don't want to get into that. The gun culture and the gun problem in America, I'm so thankful that I don't have to deal with that, think about it on a daily basis, although we hear about it so often, it almost is. I mean, I remember when we met back a year and a half ago, I was like it'd been so long since I'd been back because of COVID. I was scared to go back in terms of like the gun stuff. And I remember thinking, like, as soon as we got off the plane, it was like, you're so light and excited to be back. You really don't think about it. It's not a problem. But I do distinctly remember going out in Austin one night and kind of being in a crowded bar, and I just had a dark thought, like, oh my God, what if something happened?
No, I had the same. We were in a gay bar as well, so I was thinking, like, this is something
like
that you... Yeah, like a shooter's gonna... I just felt so vulnerable from it.
I remember not saying anything to you, and neither one of us said anything until like the next day. We were like, I thought this, and I was like, oh, I thought that too. And then sure enough, maybe like the next day, it was in, or maybe that same day, it was in the newspaper that in the suburbs of Austin there was a shooting, and there was some in a nightclub or a night establishment, and someone died. And I was like, see, it was not even a far-fetched thought in my mind. And like, so I'm really thankful that I don't have to think about that. As a teacher, I don't work in a school, but I work in a university, and I mean, I can't imagine if I had to go to school every day thinking or worrying about a child carrying a gun or an automatic weapon. I don't even know. My brain can't even like conceive that. And that is the reality of people in the US every day. And the fact that people still argue that they should have the right to buy and carry those weapons is outrageous. But anyway.
Yeah, on a happy note. No, but
it is a reality.
You know,
and you talk to other Americans, and that's a similar sentiment. Where when you go home, you have to think about those things. And I mean, one of the things we also didn't really talk about is like practical things like transport. Not having a car. I haven't had a car since I left the US. I remember selling my Jeep, and it was really sad, and I do miss driving sometimes. I mean, it's been so long since I've driven, I don't have a driver's license. I think it's a common expat problem, because if you don't have an address to get your license renewed, it often expires, and then it's really difficult to renew it. And that's the situation I'm in. That's the situation
we have 3 driver's licenses between us. I got 2, one from New Zealand, one from the UK. They're both expired.
Which is going to present a problem when we go back to a car culture like the US. Like, how are we going to get around?
Yeah, because the last time my license hadn't expired yet, so we could get a car, right? But if my license had expired, we'd have been screwed.
Yeah, we still used Uber and
Right?
No.
Lyft, is it not?
No, not Lyft, where we got it was like the Uber of cars.
Oh, of car rental.
Hitch?
Hitch?
Hitch.
Yeah,
No, that was a different one.
That was when we hitch a ride.
Yeah, that was anyway, that was like the long distance Uber. But I drive a scooter, and it's absolutely amazing. It's so much fun.
And you have a license for that.
And I do have a license for that. And so yeah, I do drive every day. I do have to commute, which sucks, but yeah, a lot of expats choose not to drive, which is fine, because Grab, which is like Uber, is very cheap for motorbikes, and even the cars and taxis are not too expensive either, which is nice.
So I think this is super interesting for 2 reasons, because one, I just told you, one of the girls on my team, Huyn, was saying to me recently, she really likes when I've been doing these episodes, kind of sharing more about my life in Saigon and Vietnam, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. She's like, because she writes the blogs for them and stuff. I said, why do you like them more, or why do you like them? She's like, because as a Vietnamese, it's really interesting to learn what a foreigner thinks of life in our country. And I was like, that's really interesting, right? Because we don't really think so much about that. And then she's quite young as well. She's like in her early 20s and uni. How would she know what a foreigner thinks of what's life like living in their country? So for people like that who...
Well, also she's proficient in English, right? So she can understand this, whereas you only speak Vietnamese and we only speak English. Then that's more difficult to get that information.
So that's cool for one reason. So hopefully people who tune into this can get a bit of an insight into what it's like to be an American living in Vietnam. But then the other reason is people thinking of coming here as an American. Like, you've had friends, I forgot about that. That was crazy. Like, friends being like, how can I move abroad because I don't want to be here? Or if you're just thinking of visiting here, really good advice.
Well, we'll see what happens in November. I mean, it could be another massive exodus from the US like it was in 2016, 17.
We'll come to Vietnam, but not too many of your countries full. We don't want to.
Well, it was just featured in a New York Times post, an article
the neighborhood we're in
specifically
right now.
in Vietnam. Yeah, expats living in Vietnam.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking about a different one. What one were you talking about?
I think it was showcasing Americans that lived abroad or overseas, and there was one picture and one story of an American girl in Saigon, in Ho Chi Minh City.
That one.
There were other cities and other countries in it as well.
The one I was referencing, did you see lots of people post it yesterday? I think it was Time Out or some big publication posted Tao Dien, the neighborhood we're in right now, is one of the coolest neighborhoods in the world.
Yeah, I think it's number 18 or something.
Which is so funny because it's true, but not. Well, it's true, but we talk all the time about how it's so different. This used to be a little sleepy.
But it was cool
enclave.
Even then. It was just less
It's a
discovered.
different
It's just
tool
now.
Now it's like
So
Vegas. It's like the Vegas of Saigon.
No, that's Boy
That's
Vien.
Boy Vien, yeah, that's true. Boy Vien is the Vegas of Saigon.
Tao
Alright.
Dien is cool.
Well, this has been our first Sunday session. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We're going to do more of these, just more of a casual chat. If you want to do a Sunday session, if you want to go out for a drink, then let me know, get in touch. Remember, join the Patreon community, as Adrie keeps reminding me to tell you. Go to patreon.com/a Vietnam podcast. You can follow us on social media. Exactly. You become a Bap Sao there if you join the Patreon Vietnam podcast. All right. Well, we'll go finish these drinks, will we? You're nearly finished yours already. Cheers.
Cheers.